All right. So I figured I'd make a quick video with a bunch of tips that surround these switches that you can find in keyboards. They really do come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. They've got different colors, they've got different properties, but the main thing, at least functionally, that these switches do is when you press them, at some point, you press them far enough that two wires connect together, and that's going to be the signal to the keyboard that indeed you're pressing something. There's lots of different details here, like you've got the more quiet switches that don't make too much noise. You've got switches with a bump in them. You've got louder switches with a click. You've got switches that have a higher actuation point, so that means that you don't have to press them down as far before they register a click. So maybe you only have to press them down like a few millimeters instead of all the way down or halfway point. There's all sorts of different settings. But the main thing that I've at least noticed as far as ergonomics and also maybe comfort goes is that some of these switches also require more force in order to press them. So I'm going to take this Newfie keyboard as an example. When I bought this, it had these super light sort of aloe green switches. If I recall correctly, these require about 37 grams of force in order to press. So you don't really need a lot of force to click them down and to register them. These are also low profile switches, so they don't need a lot of travel either. So this green switch was definitely kind of nice. Because it was nice and light. It felt kind of nice and light to my fingers. But it also provided with an issue, because if I were to take both of my thumbs and if I were to rest them on the space bar, the weight of two fingers of both my thumbs would be enough to accidentally trigger the key press. And that's not what I wanted. I also noticed something similar with my sort of index fingers. Like, I'm saying index fingers, but basically these two fingers, like the stronger fingers, so to say, they could easily press this down, but it also felt too light at times. So, typing along, these fingers have lots of force in them. So at some point I was kind of thinking, like, why would you have one kind of switch in a board? It makes way more sense to have maybe the lighter switches on the fingers that don't have as much force in them. In particular, on my right hand, you can still kind of see, well, it's hard to see, I guess, but there's a scar. I got into a bit of a fight. So at some point, someone pushed me off a table when I was in college. My finger became crooked, and they actually they had to install a platinum screw in my hand in order to make it not, crooked. But one side effect of that is that this pinky really has a lot less force than this one. This pinky, by the way, also has way less force than the other fingers, but this hand in particular is the problem. So how did I deal with it? Well, I just installed a whole bunch of different switches in this board. So I'm going to open it up a bit so people can see. So when I remove the spacebar, you can see that there's a brown switch that is the heavier of the three. Then if I remove the two main home row nib buttons, then you can see that those are red switches. Those are still relatively light, but nowhere nearly as light as this green one. And then if I move all the way to the point where my pinky is and further, right, so this is where the home row is, this is where my fingers would kind of be. All of these fingers are relatively strong, but the pinky, that requires some extra attention. So everything on the right here or on the left there, those are all the super lightweight green switches. And I don't see this advertised as much, but if you're going to be customizing a keyboard, this technique can really make a lot of sense. It really can make stuff a whole lot more comfortable. And you can really go nuts with this if you want to. And to maybe exemplify that, this is another keyboard that I own. It is the ZSA Voyager. It is a nice keyboard. We'll talk about that later. But this keyboard is also decked out with lots of different switches. So on this keyboard, I figured the home row, I would like those switches to be somewhat more tactile. You'll notice that on this keyboard, I don't necessarily feel like the pinky needs that much attention, but it's also because these are chalk switches. These are similar to the low-profile switches, but they've got even less travel in them. So I found that with my pinky, I can still very comfortably press that one. Then on the inner side over here, and these would all be buttons that are very easy to press with my index finger, I found that these red chalk switches would do. Then if I go down even further, we have these Pro Red switches. They're red on the inner side, but these are also linear, super lightweight. These aren't the most lightweight switches you can get, but these are pretty lightweight. They really remind you of the green one over here. But I just kind of found that for this keyboard, for whatever reason, that was just a lot more comfortable to type. So the strongest finger can actually, by accident, hit something here, so having a bit more force there works. But these buttons are super nice to press with my other fingers this way. And for the thumb, I actually noticed on this particular keyboard, if this is the spacebar, if I keep on hitting that all the time with my thumb, it can actually get a little bit tired if there's too much force under it. So in this case, I put the lightest switch on the main thumb as well. But then the secondary thumb button, that's more meant to trigger a shortcut that I really want to usually trigger by force a bit. That contains the clicky switch. Now, when that button is triggered, I want that to be super conscious, because when I hit it, basically an operating system shortcut happens, and there's like an overlay on the screen and stuff like that, so I never want to trigger that by accident. So that's why one of the thumb buttons, for me, it made a lot of sense to make them the lightest, and the other one, make them the heaviest. And there can even be very good reasons not to have something symmetrical. Like this board could have a different switch situation than this one. But I guess the main observation I figured I might share is that you can definitely go down a rabbit hole with these switches. So I do recommend checking out like eBay kind of sites. Like most of my switches I just buy from Marktplaats, which is like Dutch eBay. You can really go nuts, so like be a bit careful with the money spent there. But if you're interested at some point in really customizing the keyboard, part of that is programming it and setting the buttons in the right places. But a lot of the comfort also comes from being able to customize these switches. And many of these Pro keyboards, you can get them in the hot swap variant, so you can really switch the switches. But it'd be kind of a shame if you assume that you would only be able to put one switch in them. Mixing and matching, for me, has made like a pretty nice impact. It's also kind of fun, let's be honest there, but especially with my pinkies, I want those buttons to be light. If you notice something similar, like if you've got one finger that's a little bit weak, just change the switches for all the buttons that are relevant to that finger. Small pro tip.